City of Barrie acknowledges the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also acknowledge the Wendat Nation Huron who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. We are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people.
We're now going to hear from 4 individuals with many years of experience in the affordable housing sphere, coming from many different backgrounds and areas of expertise. It's important connections like these ones with many different professionals that can ensure the success of a project, and these 4 panelists we have here today represent a range of those different industries. We have individuals here that specialize in feasibility, development, social housing operations, and much more. We appreciate that affordable housing means different things to different groups, whether that's a difference in what makes something affordable, what role each of us have to play in assisting in affordability, or even a different understanding of housing types. I think everyone in this room understands that housing should be provided for everyone, regardless of income or economic status. I'd like to thank you all for joining us here tonight, and thank you in advance for teaching me something about affordable housing, because I'm sure with your expertise in these many different facets, we're all going to learn something here this evening. I think we can probably start with a bit of an introduction, so I'll pass this off to Mina here, and you can tell us what's up. I'll just let you know Nama is up on the screen. Thanks, Nama, for the wave. And we'll hear from her as well. She's just not here physically, so we'll make sure that she's included. So here you go, Mina.
Thanks, Madeline. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mina Fayez-Beckett. I am the General Manager for Simcoe County Social and Community Services Division. I've been in the role now 5 months today. I think it's actually 5 months. So I'm newer to the county. But I've come from the housing sector, and I've worked in, this will be my 4th municipality or municipally owned agency. So a little over 16 years doing this type of work. I originally started in Toronto Community Housing, which is the largest social housing provider in North America now, because the way they count New York is a little different. And you know, that's over 55,000 subsidized housing units. It's the largest and one of the oldest ones in Canada. Thereafter, I worked for the region of Waterloo, and there I was the general manager for their Waterloo Region Housing, which was the regionally owned social housing or community housing provider, as well as the system service manager for their wait list and their coordinated access work for homelessness. Most recently, again, I was at the City of Toronto in the service manager role, and there I kind of worked on the funding of the programs both for emergency shelter, homelessness, and affordable housing. And then most recently here at the county. And county, I have a little bit more of a broader responsibility. While affordable housing and homelessness are one of the pillars that I'm responsible for, also responsible for child care services, as well as Ontario Works and poverty reduction and the community safety and well-being plan. So yeah, lots.
My name is Luke Wilson. My intro and resume is not as impressive as Mina's, nor is my experience, but I've been a developer for about 12 or 13 years now, doing housing across Ontario, market development, affordable development, rental development. Just finished a project in Barrie, got to know the city of Barrie quite well. They were very helpful. And so I was asked to speak here, and obviously the affordable housing is a huge topic, issue, and you know, we've learned a lot along the way on the market side of things and the private developer side of things, so hopefully I can share some insights tonight. And I also learned a lot walking around the room today. There's a lot of good organizations here, so I will give a few thoughts and more so listen to these experts beside me.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matthew Bennett. I'm a partner at Enberry Lyon Consultants. We're planners, we're market analysts and economists. And we've got the great fortune to be working for the City of Barrie and the County of Simcoe on new housing strategies in the community. And so our role is to use economic analysis and market analysis to drive new policy strategies. And so that's what we do. We do that for the public sector, but we also work really heavily with the private development community in helping them rationalize new investment decisions. And so we take that private sector decision-making mindset and we apply that to public policy so that when we have new policy strategies, they're grounded in an economic and market reality and they can be implemented in the community. I'm trained as an urban planner and I've been working in the sector for 15 years.
Awesome. Thank you. Nama, did you want to share?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. First of all, let me apologize for not being there in person, but trust me, that was the plan. It just, some things went wrong in the very last minute. So hi, everyone. I'm Nama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density. We, specifically with the City of Barrie, we were retained for the New Foundations initiative, which is a very exciting and extremely smart initiative led by the city. And I advocate for affordable housing. Part of it bringing the notion that affordability is a spectrum, and I will cover that as part of this panel. I also volunteer with Kehila, which is an deeply affordable housing provider, and with several organizations that say yes in my backyard. So this is me, and happy to be here. Well, not physically there with you, but here in this space.
Thanks so much, Nama. And maybe you can get started and tell us why you're passionate about affordable housing and what you see as the #1 obstacle for creating affordable housing.
So I would even specifically, as I said, for me, affordability is a spectrum. There's social housing, there's affordable housing, there's attainable housing, but we need to address them all. And I often say that this is really the crisis of our generation, and unfortunately, we have more than one crisis to choose from. But apparently, it's very clear that what worked for previous generations is no longer working for us. And we need to address it on several levels, understanding that affordability is a spectrum and that we can welcome new typologies and new, perhaps even cultural shifts of what we think is the right way to live into more dense and compact way of living. Specifically, I know we'll get to that, but I think Barrie has incredible opportunities, especially post-COVID, that we can talk about. As for the #1 challenge in achieving affordability, I want to pick the cultural mindset that many of the time, especially on my project, and it could be even private sector condominium, and it could be deeply affordable housing because we do both. We often see very passionate objection from the neighbors, and it's that NIMBYs culture that we need to address and we need to tackle as a society, and saying, yes in my backyard, but that challenge of public mindset and cultural perception of what is right, what happens if something else that doesn't look exactly like my house will be built down the road, is extremely challenging. And I said that as someone who wasn't, born and raised in Canada, coming here and understanding that culture was very shocking.
Yeah. Thank you, Nama. Matt, did you want to share why you're passionate about affordable housing and what you think the #1 obstacle is for creating it?
Of course, yeah. Frankly, our firm doesn't come to affordable housing through altruism. We come at this from a really pragmatic perspective, and we understand this from an economic lens, and where we have great demand across the housing spectrum. We have supply that's serving a very small fraction of that demand. And we come at this with a curiosity about why is this happening, and then we can develop solutions to address that. And so the biggest obstacle, there are many, many obstacles to creating affordable housing. NIMBYism, as Nama just articulated, is one factor. Capacity in the sector for building housing at a variety of points in the spectrum is an issue. But the biggest thing that we see in our practice is that there's no off-the-shelf business case for a private sector developer to create new affordable housing. There's a really big gap there. And so that's the biggest obstacle, and it's one that is solvable, but it's an all hands on deck type of problem. We all have to tackle this. We have to tackle it from a local community perspective. We have to tackle it from a funding and government perspective. And there's also a role for municipalities to play in being that concierge or that matchmaker to bring all of those pieces together to facilitate development. And there's also, of course, an urban planning lens to that by allowing the type of development that we need to see to drive that compact built form.
Luke, did you want to tell us what you think the number one obstacle is and why you're passionate about affordable housing?
Yeah, so I'll cover both. So the passion is as much about the process. And I'm looking at my phone because I've got some notes here. Passion is as much about the process of creating it as creating itself. There's, and I see it around this room again with all these organizations, it takes a ton of coordination. As was just alluded to, it does not make sense as a standalone business case to do a full affordable building or affordability at any scale. There are organizations who do it, but they're generally not-for-profits or government organizations. So the best way is to use the resources of the private sector, municipalities, province, the not-for-profits, volunteers, and you can get it done. The biggest obstacle is costs. I mean, it's an obvious answer, but it's land costs, construction costs, financing costs, and then opportunity costs. The city, it's easy to say the city should put up a 100-unit rental building. Okay, they've got to get the land for it, the money for it, and they're taking that from elsewhere. You get the private sector to do it. They can put 100 units up. Maybe they get incentivized with 10 additional units to be affordable. The city does their part. The county may give a grant. The province may, give a low-cost loan, and everybody benefits, and it's not necessarily a handout, it's everyone sort of taking their share, which is what we have found to be successful, and it creates a nicer community as well. It's sort of, the for-profit, the not-for-profit living together, and nobody knows the wiser. So, to circle back, it is costs, but it's can be overcome by sharing in the costs amongst all levels.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mina, please share.
I guess my passion comes from, a background of this idea of community building, literally and figuratively. And I think being able to be a public servant and work with, through the public service to try to build a community that's healthy and safe and promotes well-being is something that's always kind of attracted my interest and piqued my interest. And I think it's interesting now, on the obstacle question, there could have been a long list if you asked that question a few years ago. Land acquisition and zoning and funding and financing and all these things that are bricks and mortars often related and to get you started. I think now the number one, even political will used to be one. I've never seen a time like now where all of those things have been set aside with new legislation, new leadership. There's a lot of things happening right that now is probably the best time in, I think, the last 50 years since post-World War II, 60 years or 70 years now, that we can build affordable housing. It's the obstacle, Numa and everyone's kind of alluded to it a little bit, it's the community will. Property values and affordability are very well, obviously closely related. In the last 10 years, we've seen everyone's property values, for those who are fortunate to be homeowners, skyrocket. That perpetuates a social divide. That social divide equates to NIMBYism. The not in my backyard because my property is worth a lot. And if you do this in my backyard, it won't be worth as much as it is right now. And, some of those myths need to be a little bit challenged and broken down. And the way I look at it is going back to that passion is if you build communities and they're healthy, they don't only assist those in need and address the affordability need, but they actually improve the well-being of all, and including those who are fortunate to own and have valuable lands and properties. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you share some unique or interesting ways in which affordable housing initiatives have worked in other municipalities, other places? It can be somewhere you work, doesn't have to be.
There's, again, like I said, these last few years, we've seen some really innovative ways to create affordable housing, including here. So I'm going to give a shout out to Simcoe County here because I'm new to it. But some of the things that we're accomplishing in just the last, 6 or 7 years have been incredible. Luke and Matt talk about this idea of sustainability of a rental property. Like, how can you make it be able to cover its own expenses? That's really one of the biggest barriers for the private sector. As you build these things, the income or the revenue isn't high enough to pay for its ongoing growing costs over time. The county has taken this incredibly courageous approach, which is not inexpensive by any means, of putting up the money up front for the next 50 years of costs. So that what happens is when these buildings start to age and need a lot of upkeep, we're not hitting the public sector with a huge, incredibly much more expensive hit 50 years from now than they are today. So they're pre-purchasing that service delivery, which is not done anywhere else. So that's an example of one innovative way. There's these new models coming out of York Region, these 360 homes, like your documentary for the young individuals that shared today. Imagine a time or a place in your experience of those last 2 years where things weren't going well, that you didn't have to leave the place you were at to go get other services and supports so that you could not disrupt your stability. So these 360 homes have, they start with emergency shelters, and then they have social enterprises like job-based employability on site. Then they have like community living, and then single living, independent living, affordable living, all the way to market rent. And the idea is here is if you have a bad week, month, or year, you don't get to leave that community. You're still part of the community where you have all your connection points. So I think that's another really good one happening. And then the third one that was mentioned is the portable rent subsidy. One of the coolest things that the National Housing Strategy that came out in 2015-14 did is it gave us municipalities the opportunity to issue a rent subsidy that isn't tied to the property. So you're not trapped in one place and you can never leave, because if you leave, you lose your subsidy in that apartment. This is one that says go find the place that is most suitable to you, wherever your social connections, your family connections are at, and take that subsidy with you and apply it to that rent. So sometimes if you're living in more urban areas and things are expensive, but if you could go back home to where you grew up or where your grandma lives or something like that, and the rents are much more considerably affordable, that portability gives you freedom and more flexibility to make your decisions. So I think those are three really good examples just in the last 10 years or less that have been really helpful to promote affordability.
Awesome. Luke, did you have any examples of other places where there's something unique or interesting?
I do. So in other places as well as City of Barrie is doing it. So a couple on-the-ground examples is deferred charges for rental units or for affordable end-user units. Deferred charges could be building permit fees, development charges, taxes, anything. So, for example, if I'm building a condo, my upfront cost might be $100,000 for that condo, and I can get that back when I sell the condo when it's built in 2 or 3 years. For a rental, you're paying the same amount up front, but you're not selling it. You're just collecting rent for however many years. The City of Barrie, as well as the province, have put in policies in order to allow you to defer these charges. So they're still collecting them. It might just be over 10 years instead of 1 year. And that is a huge, huge saving when you're putting up big money up front to build units. If you can spread it out over 10 years, that's the difference between the project being a go and not being a go. So development charges, incentives, that kind of thing, anything that can defer. And then in terms of what else is being done, or where I've seen it work in other places, we've been talking about rental here, but there's also a few organizations that provide options for attainable or entry-level purchases. There's Habitat for Humanity has done this. They allow you to come up with a reduced down payment. They will partner with the National Bank, who will come up with a larger loan than one might typically get. And then they allow you to partially work or volunteer to pay down your loan. They'll allow you to have deferred or longer payments, and it gets somebody in the door of these new homes who may not otherwise be able to get them. So Habitat's done that. There's a group called Options for Homes who does that. They come up or share in the down payment. It's sort of a loan, but it gets you a home for, half of what you would ordinarily, or a quarter of what you'd ordinarily put down, and it's something that, without it, everyone using it would not be close to affording a home. So there's groups who are doing that, and again, it's a collaboration of them as a not-for-profit, the bank as a lender, and then ultimately it comes back to the renter or buyer themselves. They, do their part. They work hard, they pay for it, they take care of their place, and everybody wins, and it's no loss to anyone either. So that type of collaboration is going to be a topic, I think, that everyone's going to mention, but it does work when you work together on that kind of stuff.
Yes, please add, Matthew. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Wow, great examples, guys. One thing that I'll point at is building capacity within non-traditional sectors. And so, Mina, you mentioned the barrier of acquiring land and how expensive that is. Well, there are many groups who, by their nature, have land, but they don't have the experience or capacity to make real estate decisions or do development. The New Foundations Project is fantastic and I'll point to sort of an origin of that. We were retained by the United Church of Canada about 5 or 6 years ago. They were going to CMHC to collect grants to do studies for housing projects across the country. And they didn't have the capacity to know how to make good real estate or planning decisions. And CMHC was having to write off the grants and loans. They were failing. The projects were just not getting off the ground because they didn't have a realistic understanding of what was achievable from a planning perspective or what was realistic from an economic perspective. But these were really well-meaning volunteers, trustees of local churches who are trying to do right in their community. And so CMHC said, stop. We can't do this. We have to reorganize. And so we were really fortunate to win an RFP, and we got to do this national land strategy for the United Church of Canada. And they have a portfolio of 3,000 properties across the country. And what we found is that they didn't have high-valued property everywhere, but that's okay. This is a really large organization, but in a few key sectors across the country, there was an extraordinary amount of value tied up in land that was relatively underutilized from a real estate perspective. And so we helped them build a new strategy to have that decision-making power in-house. And the analogy was you're double the size of Sobeys nationally, and you better believe that Sobeys has a real estate department. And all you need is a really small and nimble team that can work nationally. This would be planners, maybe a real estate analyst, and somebody who understands commercial lending. And you can build this really nimble team to help empower local trustees across the country to make good real estate decisions, to really drive this. We thought maybe we'll change the way that real estate decision-making happens within this organization, and we found that actually the real estate decision-making is entrenched in acts of parliament. That's a huge obstacle, not achievable. But what we did is we had conversations with local community groups and local trustees, and we said, what if there was this group that could help you make a real estate decision? Would you give them the keys? Would you help? Would you let them drive that decision-making on your behalf? If you had a really clear charter of what you'd like to get out of the project, so a bit of affordable housing, maybe some community space, and people would well up. They were trying to do right by their community, and they just didn't have the tools or capacity to do this. And so we found by creating a really small, nimble team, we did that by going and getting Innovation Fund grant money through CMHC. So CMHC came back to the table and said, yes, this is the idea we'd like to fund, and they created this organization. It's now called Kindred Works, and it's doing work. It's partnering now outside of the United Church of Canada. It's working with the Anglican Diocese of Toronto and other groups, and they've built a small, nimble real estate team. So they understand planning, they can help organizations or local communities, churches get through the planning process, bring in banks and lenders, and they're making projects happen. And the model there is it's a not-for-profit development because they don't have to go out and acquire land. They have that intrinsic value built in the land already. And so it's really about finding the right mix of market and affordable housing to make the development pro forma work. And so this is an example that the city of Barrie is building upon with the New Foundations work, and they should be given a lot of credit for that. But it's an example that translates to other sectors as well. There's lots of groups with lots of real estate that's underutilized, and these are the opportunities in our communities that we can look to explore. where the profit is not the only objective, and developers shouldn't be given a bad rap for requiring profit. They're commercial groups, and they should get profit. There's a lot of risk in real estate, and so taking a profit is appropriate. But there are groups that don't need the same rate of return as a private developer, and so the United Church is doing this for a lower rate of return, and we're getting projects happening. So there are opportunities like this that we can explore.
Awesome. Speaking of new foundations, Nama, did you want to share some unique or interesting ways?
I actually really wanted to echo what Matthew just said. Land exists. You will be surprised by the opportunities that could come with partnerships. And we have a project that way also. We don't need to look too far. We have a project in Toronto with St. Clair's, existing site, just an infill project. You will look at the site today and you will be surprised how definitely underutilized, but not a huge piece of land. And we're doing that with modular construction, so it's faster, it is cheaper in comparison at that scale for sure. Slab on grade, part 9 of the building code, which is the more permissive part of the building code, and we want to keep it really simple, really fast. City of Toronto is working with us. We applied for CMHC seed funding to get through the approvals. So that mindset of there are opportunities, infill opportunities, land exists, people already own land that they could utilize, and they will be surprised by how much. And that is a really great example that I really like. And also with construction, and I believe that modular construction is only in mass timber, and in this case, it's not modular in a full form. It's imagine just the walls are being assembled off-site and being brought to the site, and just like building it with a crane, relatively simple and quickly. And I think these technologies will only get improved and from this moment on. So I'm pretty optimistic, and that was just one example, and I wanted to echo Matthew on that front.
Awesome. Thank you, Nama. Maybe we'll ask you first then, from your perspective, what is the best path forward to create more affordable housing?
So definitely partnerships. As I said, land exists, it's owned, but oftentimes they lack the expertise of, okay, what am I supposed to do from this moment on? And it's unique partnerships between the city, the owner, developers, non-for-profit, architects, and the City of Toronto is, leading it with Housing Now, that unfortunately none of the approved units have been built yet, but the concept of it. Partnership between the city and the private sector, and also what Matthew said about profit. Profit is a great incentive to get things done, and this is how we should look at it. And if this is a method, a vehicle to deliver more affordable housing, so be it. I believe that it should be done by the private sector. The private sector knows how to be very efficient with time, resources, money, energy, and we need to really find a way, a model to work in partnership with the private sector and the public sector to deliver more affordable housing. So for me, the more creative we can get in those partnerships, the faster we will deliver affordable housing.
Awesome. Thank you, Nama. Matthew, did you want to tell us from your perspective what the best path forward is?
Sure, yeah. I guess I'll reiterate that capacity building within the not-for-profit space is huge, because that's where you can empower those not-for-profit developments. I guess the second thing that I would point to, it goes to the supply argument. We need to make it easier to build denser developments everywhere. We need lots more supply. Getting to affordable housing is one thing, and depending on the depth of affordability, that can take a lot of investment, a lot of subsidy to get there. But we also we have a lack of market housing opportunities in the community, and so in all communities. And so lowering the barrier from a planning and regulatory perspective, and I know it's something that the City of Barrie is actively working on, that is really a big thing. And that comes with challenges from a community and neighborhood perspective, but I think it's something that's achievable. And then finally, from the city's perspective, marrying incentives with land is a huge one. And so where there are underutilized land opportunities, stacking that with financial incentives or deferrals of fees or waivers of fees, similar to the Housing Now program that Nama referenced in Toronto. These are really effective strategies at lowering the amount of investment that's required to get these units built, and that means that you can charge less for the unit. You can charge less for that rental unit or charge less for that affordable ownership unit.
Luke, what can you add to that as it relates to the best path forward?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what the previous two speakers said. A lot of it is, I just wrote down partnerships. Like a lot of it is the private sector working with the city, you know, whether the city gives consideration for parking requirements or height requirements or setback requirements, anything in the name of getting greater density. And then from the not-for-profits, they've obviously got a lot of people in need. They've got a lot of people they service. You know, they can work with the private sector to fill those units. They can work with the city to place people in those units. So there's a lot of groups who are working towards the same goal. You know, again, you look around the room, pretty much everybody who's here to present has the same goal. Everyone here listening has the same goal. And there's a way that people can contribute. So, yeah, the long and the short of it is just the city promoting the development, the developer, you know, building it, and then having these groups to help fill the places. But it's just a collaborative effort, I think, is the best way to get it done.
Awesome. Mina, can you tell us what your best path forward is?
I think, you know, everyone kind of covered it. I was thinking the same thing, like start by community buy-in, and that is like build a coalition of like social and strategic investments, so that you're not just going with a plan, you're going with a social development plan. So you're not just building a building, you're building a community. And I think, you know, some of that is from past experiences where you rush to do something and throw some affordable housing in a building, or the whole building's affordable, but you put it without a structure or a strategy of how that's going to work as a community. You'll learn very quickly what not to do. So I think, yeah, it's the same thing. Just like there's I think both Matt and Luke said it right. Like there's a lineup of everybody wanting to do this. It's just a matter of just making sure we leverage all the right skill sets, all the right expertise to do it right. And, you know, don't leave the community behind, because, you know, they could be your best champions or your best detractors. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We often hear that people in the community want to help and they want to be of assistance, but really not sure how. Can you tell us what you think the person in this room or the average community member can do to assist in creating affordable housing? I think I might know. Is it saying yes? Yeah.
You know, like we often get that question, like how can we do more? And we do get lots of opportunities. I'm looking over at Brad over there. He probably fields the most emails and questions of proposals of different providers and developers and people with ideas of how to do it. And I think one thing I would like to play a role as the county is being that advisor. Like I think Matt, you had shared earlier that sometimes there's no like cookie cutter design or model or strategy that helps, you know, a private developer or a nonprofit developer figure it out. They might have the land, they might have the will, they might have the money, but they just don't have the expertise on how to get it. And I think the county can play a great role of just being a good advisor and partner and say, okay, here's the business pro forma that gets you to a stable financial plan that won't collapse on you while you're trying to get this thing developed. Like, so things like that I think are come and ask for help. And you know, there's an affordable housing and homelessness strategy. It's a 10-year strategy the county has to do by its legislative authority to the province. We're about wrapping up our first 10 years, so that booth over there is asking everybody to give input on what you want the next 10 years to be here at the City of Barrie and at the county as a whole. So please please give us your feedback. Tell us what you want to see out of that strategy. Is it more portable stuff? Is it more shelters? Is it more street outreach? Is it more buildings or towers, or is it tiny homes? Like, I think these are all things we need to hear from the community, and this is that idea of like building a community social plan first before you start creating an affordable development plan. Yeah.
Luke, did you want to share what you think the community member can do to help in affordable housing?
Yeah, different people can do different things. Obviously, if you're with the City of Barrie, you have a lot more control than just a general bystander. But there's not to say that everybody can't do something. And even coming out to an event like this is very helpful. You learn a lot. It shows the city and stakeholders how much interest and concern there is. You learn about Redwood Park communities and raising the roof and the Barrie New Foundations program, so now you have a knowledge of that. And when you're in the community, when you're talking to your elected officials, be supportive or mention these or show that you have an interest and concern for it. When there is a zoning meeting or a public meeting, it's worth looking at it, commenting, yes, I like the height, yes, there's an important need here. Just supporting more being built, and then there's always volunteering opportunities. No one's going to turn down anyone's time, whether it's at local shelters, Habitat for Humanity, any other organization. There's unlimited amounts. If you want to do something, it's as easy as sort of go out in the community and find anyone who needs a hand, and I'm sure they'd be willing to take it. So just to finish that, yeah, everybody here is already helping by showing up. So.
Thanks. Matthew, what can you add to that?
Oh, it's really well said. I think I'll put it more bluntly. Say yes. Say yes to change. Say yes to density. We need the supply. And so being an advocate in your community and spreading that positivity around growth and development, I think is really key. Vote and vote for people who are supportive of that. If you are fortunate enough to be a homeowner, consider doing an accessory dwelling unit, or consider doing a basement apartment. If you're fortunate to have a really large home and can explore opportunities like that, there are grant programs available or funding programs available to do stuff like that, and so that you can create supply in your own backyard and be that example for your neighborhood.
Awesome. Nama, what can you tell us about the people that want to help?
One of the most interesting observations that I had is that the yes in my backyard people, or the pro-housing people, are really citywide. They come to events like this one and speak up on the city level. And the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard, go and object every development that it's just development specific. And then it's skewing it's not democracy when you listen to the 1% that is very, very vocal. So just like what Matthew said, it's say yes, show up, say yes, this is important. We have no other way to grow. We can't sprawl forever. It's not a sustainable way to grow. It's not a sustainable way to build more roads and build more expensive infrastructure. We have to use the resources that we already have. And I want to pick up on something that Matthew said about supply, and absolutely, we still have a supply. We, according to numbers and population growth, we're not even approving 20% of the units that we need, not to mention not building, and that is across the GTA, not specifically for Barrie. But I would also say that supply, and we're not building the supply that we need, that reflects the needs, the diverse needs of us as communities. And that could be units for families, and I'm not saying necessarily very big units, I'm just saying units that could be appropriate or family friendly, multi-generational units, that is also a very common form of living in many parts of the world. My partner grew up with his grandmother in the same unit, in the same apartment. That we don't see. So I think there's also, unfortunately, when the private sector doesn't deliver, there's also a role for the municipality and the public to say, this is what we need. We need more of that. So these are, hopefully I'm giving you like some good inspiration and ideas on how you can get involved, but it is being at the table, and you will be surprised how many developers want to have a less adversarial discussion for sure, and they are very open-minded. It's just that oftentimes the discussion is just not, we just don't want to see anything here. It's not even NIMBY, it's banana. I heard that. Build absolutely nothing anywhere. I really like that banana acronym. So anyway, that would be my advice, and my hope too, not just advice.
Awesome. Thank you, Nama. I think I'll ask you our next and final question too. I know you haven't been here the whole evening, Nama, but what have you heard in this panel that has inspired you, has surprised you, or you're going to keep with you as you do your next project?
So to be honest, that event, and I was very much looking forward to attending, that event I think is unique on its own. The fact that the city of Barrie is so, first and when was the last time you heard municipality holding or hosting this type of event? I don't know. So even the fact that you're leaders in this fair and having a public event about saying, come and listen and learn and let's talk about it, how we can achieve it. I think it's a really inspiring and such an important first step in achieving a better future. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe I'll ask you, Matthew, what did you hear tonight that you think will inspire you, you'll take with you? What's going to stick with you?
Yeah, I think the thing that will stick with me most is, I'm an urban planner and economist, and so I get really into the weeds, into the numbers, into the demographics. But events like this are so motivating and inspiring because we get to put faces and names to real lived experiences. And when we go back and we start to craft opportunities and strategies for how to tackle the gaps that we see in the housing fabric, I'm going to think about the people in this room, and I'm going to think about the stories that I heard. And it's really motivating to think about creative solutions and go in and put in those hours and figure out how to get this done, because it's a really big challenge. It's if there was a silver bullet, we'd be pulling the trigger. There's no one easy answer to this, and it takes a lot of effort and work and collaboration. But the energy and the positivity and the collaborative spirit that we saw tonight, I think, is really, really empowering.
Awesome. Luke, did you want to share what you heard tonight that will stick with you?
Yeah, I've heard lots. Starting with that movie that was the film, very good. So is it Devin, Sonia, very good, and Anthony, who left. That was a great movie, great attitude from all of the people in it, and great work ethic, great hustle. So there's our good success stories, and that's, I think, part of what you guys want to do here tonight is show some success stories and not make it all negativity. Which is good. And then the other thing I've heard and seen is great support for creation of more housing. Usually when I'm in a room with this many people up speaking, they're all yelling about what not to build and how they don't like the design or how it's got too many stories or not enough parking. Versus here, I'm hearing from all directions the importance of building more and building up and density and the need for more units. So that's, somebody mentioned the 1%, who yells the loudest can slow things down, but if there's a group of people who yell back, it can speed things up. So that's sort of the group here and the city and everyone else in this room, which is great to hear for the future development.
Awesome. Mina, would you like to share?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it's always inspiring to just be in a room of people who have a common goal and focus. And, coming to the county, I'm always in awe of everyone who's ready and willing to do more. At the last county council, we were presenting our next affordable housing development, and I was terrified that we were going to get yelled out of the room because we're coming in with a big plan and a big number, and our number one set of questions were, well, this isn't enough, you've got to do more. And I've never heard that in my whole career, where the political will is so clear. It was a unanimous 34 0 vote to get us going, and with the commitment to come back and show us a bigger plan. So I think it's really inspiring, and I strongly urge everyone to walk around one last time and check out Redwood and all of our other partners in this room, the City of Barrie, and what they're doing with their strategy. There's a lot happening, and it's really exciting. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And there's lots of surveys to do for both of us. Yeah, complete the surveys, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. We're going to ask for questions to be done kind of one-on-one with our panelists, and I can absolutely come speak with you about a specific project if you'd. Correct. Yes. Thanks very much. Thanks so much for coming. I mean, it's so interesting to see such a wide range of experts in the room together, but all kind of have very similar messages and very similar, paths forward and ideas to make things different than they are now, and hopefully much better. So I'm hopeful that everyone has taken away something from tonight. I definitely know that I have.
This symposium is a great event put on by the City of Barrie, certainly highlighting the need for affordable housing all throughout our community. The county plays a key role in affordable housing across the whole region, not just within the City of Barrie. So we wanted to show up, illustrate some of the programs that we have, certainly celebrate our successes that we have with our own affordable housing strategy as we wrap up the final stage of it, where we've met our targets, and then also celebrate and introduce our new building up, where we're going to be moving forward with our new affordable housing plan and targets. Well, affordable housing means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but really the important thing is housing needs to be affordable across the whole range of the housing spectrum. So that's right from RGI, which is a very deep subsidy at the low end, right into some affordable, where we usually peg around 70 to 80% of average market rent, which is deemed affordable, and as well as the low end of market as well. There's lots of working families that still would struggle with the rents, and any break on that rent is helpful. And so the county is going to be going forward with some mixed development communities as well, or mixed income communities, where we'll be doing rents right from RGI all the way up to full market. Well, hopefully everyone takes away there is a huge need across the whole county. We need, I think it's been stated by the panel, that we have a huge deficit in supply, and we need supply across all ranges of affordability. And so we really need to garner that support from the public, as well as the politicians and our upper levels of government, to make this a priority.
Well, affordable housing is what we're all about. We're working to build communities and have the whole community be affordable housing. And we're looking to offer rentals, affordable rentals, rent to own, and affordable to purchase housing, all within a community. So it's the focus of what we're doing. We are a federally incorporated not-for-profit. We were formed in 2017 and started out just advocating for tiny homes and tiny home communities. And now we're moving into being an actual developer of tiny home communities. So it's been slow, kind of interesting, because when I started, nobody really talked about affordable housing in 2017, and definitely nobody talked about tiny homes. So now we've had a great year, because we started out reaching out to municipalities across Ontario, and we have 14 municipalities that came forward and said, yes, we have land that can be developed for affordable housing. Another 30 of them said, well, we like the idea, and we're going to look at our inventory and see if we have something. So it's great. People are acknowledging that we're in a housing crisis. Everybody's known it for a long time, but nobody would talk about it. Now they're acknowledging it, and we're finding everybody very open to looking at alternatives, and that's what we are. We're a housing alternative. When I bought my first house, I bought it was a semi-detached house in Toronto. Okay, not a real, and this was back in 80 something, early 80s. I mean, it wasn't considered a very upscale type of form of housing. And then my second home was a row townhouse in Pickering. And again, that wasn't considered it was considered low, status housing, if you will. So each time something new comes along, there's a fear that it's going to be a bad thing. And yet all those houses now, I mean, my house in Toronto was like, I can't remember how many million I saw it was up for. So it's just perception. It's, and same thing with tiny homes. People equate tiny homes with trailer park style living. And at one point, that's the only people who chose to live there, right? Because that's all there was. Now people are looking at tiny homes differently because they can be built the same, like our homes are built to the same building code as a regular home. It's just tiny. That's the only difference. So, you're not buying something or you're not living in something that is trashy. It's different.
So I'm super excited to be here at the first Affordable Housing Symposium that's put on by the City of Barrie. It was really an evening to talk about affordable housing and housing affordability with a whole bunch of experts in the room. It began with a documentary on youth that were transitioning out of homelessness, and then we had this fantastic panel discussion with experts in the field. So it was open to anybody, and so we were hoping to have members of the community, members of council, and leaders in the field, and we had that. So it was fantastic to see all of those people in the same room and listening about affordable housing in general. We hear about how affordable housing is such an issue, and there's such a spectrum of housing from when a person goes from being homeless and experiencing homelessness all the way to being able to purchase an at-market house. There's so many steps in between there, and every organization and person has a different role in each of those levels. So we really tried to get a cross-section of views, a cross-section of opinions to talk about this super important topic that's not only important to the City of Barrie, and its residents, but across Simcoe County. So I think one of the biggest things that I hope people take away from being at this symposium was a little bit about listening to some lived experiences of youth that experienced homelessness and where they are now. So that, I think, is a bit of an uplifting story, and often the dialogue around affordable housing or housing affordability, attainable housing, whatever you call it, is slightly discouraging, a little bit negative, a little bit like, oh, nothing we're doing is helping. So I think the lived experience was amazing. And then to hear from experts in the field in terms of, what are the things that we can do? And I think, the whole point of the idea was to have those experts in the room and hear actually about all the strides we've already made. One of the panelists spoke specifically, if we were having this conversation 5 or 10 years ago, everything would be different. The government regime, the fees and charges, all those sorts of things. So we are in a better place. We all have done a lot of work to get to a better place. But I think there's still lots that we can do. And I think a lot of what they talked about, some of the experts, was about, accepting change and growth and different housing types in your community and being a champion for that. And I think that was a really big takeaway for people. We are just so grateful that we had such a positive outcome and turnout for this event. So many people came. It was really fantastic. And so we thank everybody for coming. We thank people at home for watching. And there's tons of information out there on www.buildingbarrie.ca. And affordable housing is one of those hot topics on that landing webpage.